All right, a very early Friday show for To Be Determined, the 11th episode.
I don't know that.
Well, early for us. Not for most people. Not for most people. At Sports by Bond with that Trabs. Matt, what's the word?
White tea.
White tea?
I'm really fancy in my dress this morning.
This is coffee, brother.
White tea.
Oh, you're wearing a white tee. Okay, all right.
White tea and blinds.
I think you always wear a white tee for the Friday show. It's like your thing.
No, well, it's only been 2 in a week.
Okay,
Or
all right.
the last 2 weeks.
All right, well, that's what I remember. That's what I remember.
Because usually I better, but not today, people. Deal with it. Woo. What are you doing?
Sorry, I got my iWatch here, or Apple Watch, whatever the heck it's called. It goes off. I mean, I got it on silent mode, so it'll ring, but then it starts vibrating, and I'm like, oh my god.
Wait, it's not an iWatch? Doesn't that make sense?
No, it would make sense, but it's not called iWatch. I think they wanted to get away from the term iWatch, so they call it the Apple Watch. Yes. Yeah. The one thing that isn't called i.
Really?
iPhone, iPad, iPod, Apple Watch. Whatever. All right. A busy day, especially for you, sir. You are headed off to Bills camp, representing 13 Wham for day 2 of camp.
2 of them things.
We're going to talk day 1 because we're recording this before.
Let's talk what happened in day 2.
We can. It hasn't happened. Hence the reason we're going to talk just day 1. We're recording this before day 2. So, the big takeaway from day 1 was that Sammy was back. He was a full go. Or he wasn't a full go, rather, but he took more reps. I want to clarify that. Wasn't fully, I guess, cleared back, whatever, but he did take more reps than usual. He said the foot isn't an issue and he wants this thing to be done, and I get why he wants it to be done. Bad PR. He's now in a contract year. This 2017 becomes a contract because the Bills declined to pick up that 5th year, so he's got to prove it. And he doesn't want the idea that, he's a China doll and that he's injury prone and all that stuff to come up in negotiations. So that's coming right from his camp and his agent and whatnot.
And what's surprising to me, I'm not sure surprising is the right word, it's just striking, is that even though he wasn't a full go, but because he was out there for so many reps, you knew it was going to happen at some point.
Yeah.
But just seeing it actually happen finally for the first time in a while is definitely striking. It's definitely a sight to behold.
Seeing him catch balls, is that what you're referring to?
Or yeah, just seeing
running
him out there
for
more and more reps now.
Okay.
Through minicamp, it was just little morsels here and here and here. Now it's definitely ramped up a little bit. I didn't think that would happen maybe right off the bat at St. John Fisher. And he's definitely taking a very aggressive approach, which I think when he was younger, and it makes sense because he's just getting into the league, maybe aggressive. He's maybe a little bit more meek in terms of everything he was doing in terms of the public eye as an NFL player. But even in the press conference afterwards, he's maybe not rudely cutting off people, but he's getting right into responses after questions,
Yep.
Dashing all doubts in terms of the health of his foot.
Yeah, I think he wants to get out in front of it. I think he needs to get out in front of it. This is a big year for Sammy. Now, whether the Bills bring him back on a contract or he has to dip his toe into free agency, this is a huge year for Sammy. He knows, I think at minimum, he needs to play 14 games. At minimum, 14.
Someone's got to get.
Yeah, and honestly, he hasn't had a full season yet. So if he were to go out and get a full season here, and he gets, well above, let's say he gets 1,200 yards. Let's say he goes for 13 touchdowns, and he plays a full 16, there better be a contract waiting for Sammy at the end of Week 17 from the Buffalo Bills, and it better be a pretty sizable contract. It doesn't need to be a max, it doesn't need to be a wild deal. He's not going to compete with the best paid players. But frankly, I wouldn't mind seeing a hefty sum for Sammy. I wouldn't mind seeing a $8-9 million a year for 2 years, for 3 years, somewhere low range to allow him almost like a middle of the road contract and nothing long term. So you're not committed to the guy long term, but almost another chance for him to prove it. get him paid, get him happy, but almost have it to be like a Kevin Durant type contract.
If he plays in 14 games.
Yes, if he plays more than 14 games.
Even if he's playing 14 games as opposed to a full season, quote unquote, he better put up the numbers.
Yeah.
Because, like we were talking right before we came on and started recording today, there are arguably half the fan base not fully done with him, fully annoyed with him, but they're getting there.
Yeah. I think it's 50-50.
Yeah, and if he finally gets this at least close to full season, he better have the numbers because Zay Jones is oozing potential right behind him. And that's another young guy that I think Bills fans, with all the headaches, and they're not all necessarily because of him. I mean, injuries you can't prevent sometimes, but they've been coming and coming and coming. People are starting to get fed up with it a little bit more in this fan base. Zay Jones, right there to take the reins, I would say, at that number one, if it doesn't happen this year, if he doesn't use the time he seemingly is going to get with how healthy he is, fingers crossed, at the moment. But if he does have those numbers, you mentioned middle of the road. Geez, I remember a big part of Hard Knocks this past season was Tavon Austin getting a huge contract.
Yeah.
And Sammy Watkins, in limited time, I think is a much better NFL wide receiver at his age, or not even relative to age, than Tavon Austin in this league. So he deserves to get paid if he puts up middle of the road. He deserves to get paid at least a lot more if he puts up some kind of numbers, maybe not through the roof kind of numbers, if he finally gets some games in him this year.
Would you be opposed to getting him like a bridge contract that would be that 2 to 3 year window that would get him paid a little bit more? I can't remember if he's due to make $9 million this year or whatever it is, but so let's call it $11 million. So you get him a pay raise, but it's $11 million over 2-3 years.
I would have to agree with that because, I mean, the guy, you can't get around his injury past.
Yeah.
So I would be all for that. I'd be all for that.
So you're not completely committed to him long term, but you're also not financially all the way in with him. You're not putting all the chips in on Sammy and saying, all right, you know, we understand we need a number one receiver. You're the guy. We got no choice. And I think you're right with Zay. Zay's, as you have talked about a number of times, you're big on the Zay train, if you will. I'm still Matt's trying to be the conductor. I'm still reserving judgment. I want to see where this camp goes with him. I want to see what he does in the first few preseason games. But listen, as you mentioned, there's no denying you can't catch almost 200 balls, and literally it's almost 200. It was 198, I think, his senior year, and not have some talent. And that should scare Sammy a little bit. That should make him fairly nervous, and that's a good thing. Competition brings out the best in people. If it wasn't for you, I'd slack, because I know you're bringing your A game every week.
Right back at you?
That's the point. No, you don't know that about me.
That kind of contract is the best of both worlds because hopefully you have the at least somewhat mature mindset of Sammy realizing that he hasn't really proven himself yet, so he shouldn't get that extra level of contract. And the fact that even though it's unavoidable for him, he's had injury issues. That's just the reality of it, so hopefully he would understand that kind of contract.
All right, let's move to Shady quickly. Shady was Shady, looked spry. The main thing with 25 is just get him through camp. Frankly, no one should get a hand on this guy. I don't want anyone near his legs. Just get him through camp. Frankly, if they were to just let him do reps on the side on his own, I'd be fine with that.
I mean, this is a guy, he came out. He's been so good to start in Buffalo after being able to have success elsewhere. He's shown that he has the longevity in this league out of the backfield. Hey, the only thing that should be hurting him in this training camp is when maybe he tightens up the bucket hat strings. Because, you got to be careful with the guy. And I think he's probably okay with maybe not going full-fledged into training camp too.
I would think so.
I said
most veterans would be
already. Best of both worlds.
Well, and think about it too. When his first year here, he had that huge hamstring injury that lingered. That did linger throughout the season. And you wonder if it caused. Didn't he have an ankle injury after that?
I believe so.
So you wonder if that. Now I'm not trying to say they're connected in any way, but you wonder if they were. That the one led to the other. Your body will overcompensate for things when you're injured. You wonder if that happened. Last year, he was 100% healthy. He went into the year as good as can be, and he showed it. I mean, he was. You think about the top guys: Le'Veon Bell, Adrian Peterson. Shady McCoy is right there with the best of them. Ezekiel Elliott obviously made the big splash last year. I know Zeke was great. I'd rather have Shady for this year than Zeke.
Because, after last season, 2 years ago, different stuff, but after last year, definitely less off-the-field stuff going on with LaShawn, rather surprisingly, than a Zeke Elliott.
And even last year, Shady had the off-the-field issue at the club in Philly.
Law enforcement, yeah.
So,
but in comparison, woof.
Yes, in comparison, different. So we're going down a whole nother rabbit hole that has nothing to do with it. The point is that Shady looks good, and you got to keep Shady healthy.
Yeah.
Let's go to the third cog in that wheel, or third wheel in that cog, whatever the saying is. I'm way off here.
Watch your language.
Tyrod Taylor. The report yesterday that he was solid, and I think that's what you want from your number one on day one. Now, I think starting week 2, I want Tyrod to look as sharp as possible. To me, with the guys that are behind him, there shouldn't be a quarterback controversy. The GM isn't tied to any guy anymore, the way Doug Whaley used to be tied to E.J. Manuel, despite him denying it constantly and at every turn. Tyrod's your number one. He still has to take control, though. He's got to look solid. I think week 2 it needs to be, man, this guy's zipping the ball around. You see the leadership from him. He's always had those leadership qualities, and I think ever since they gave the keys to Tyrod, the one area he hasn't lacked in is leadership. The areas that he's lacked in are accuracy.
Of the two options, yes, you can only put so much stake into how well a guy does in training camp. But of the two options, you want him doing well rather than doing poorly in training camp.
Right.
But this is a guy, and a lot of it is coach speak, but McDermott has said with everybody that everyone is fighting for their job. No one's starting gig at the moment is definitely set in stone. And, hey, his backup in TJ Yates has won playoff games before.
Yeah.
So TJ, Tyrod, all these T's. So Tyrod just has to play with, and that's what he's doing so far. It's one day, but hey, it's better than no days.
Well, and if you're the Bills, it's nice to have that serviceable backup. And the thing I like about TJ Yates is that he came in with the right attitude, saying, listen, I get that this is Tyrod's team. I'm here to be the number 2. And I'm big on self-awareness. I think you have to be self-aware. So Yates has got to play well enough to put pressure on Tyrod, but not too much pressure to where there's a quarterback controversy. I don't think that's healthy right now for the state of this team. Personally, I don't. There's enough going on with this team from a defensive standpoint, from your wide receivers. It's been a pretty tumultuous offseason in the front office. There's finally what you hope is stability, but you really don't know, especially with the Pagulas. They pulled the cord on Rex after 2 years. They pulled the cord on Dan Bylsma after 2 years. This is an ownership group that has showed that they're not afraid to pull the plug. So the one staple over the past couple years has been Tyrod here under center. And you hope that year 1 he took the job. Year 2 he sort of made some growth. And frankly, the offense over the past couple years has been the strong part of this team. It's been the strong aspect of this team. When it is, and you say that it's surprising, and it absolutely is, considering under Jim Schwartz, this was the 4th best defense in the league, and that was not that long ago.
And they brought in Rex.
Yeah, and you thought it's going to be on steroids with Rex, but it wasn't. It was the complete opposite, and they dropped from 4th to 19th, and last year was just as bad. This is a defense that's going to struggle in the secondary. So Tyrod has got to be able to put up points. The fact that he's solid day 1 is good. I want him to be spectacular week 2.
Yeah, I don't think there's any. It's really just coach speak, kind of like I mentioned before. I think it's mostly coach speak from McDermott. I think it's his job, and he's making sure of it, even if there was that inkling of doubt beforehand going into camp.
Yeah. All right, let's go to Nathan Peterman, who appears to be the 3rd quarterback on this depth chart. And the word from our buddy Joe Biscaglia at WKBW was he struggled. And that's what you'd expect from a rookie. He was taken what? Was he a 5th-round pick?
I think he was. That sounds definitely familiar.
I was thinking 4th or 5th. Cardale was the 4th. Cardale no longer on the roster. They traded Cardale to Anthony Lynn's new team, the now Los Angeles Chargers. You feel bad for Cardale because he was never really given a full shake here, but he wasn't going to be because he was a project quarterback. And now you bring in Peterman. I think Peterman was a McDermott pick, where Jones was clearly a Doug Whaley pick. And now that there's no longer Doug Whaley in the front office, Brandon Beane clearly not afraid to move on from that piece, and to get a pick back. I mean, that's great. I mean, I don't care if it's a 7th-round pick. This is a project quarterback. He hasn't proven anything, so you get something for something. But the fact is now that this is, Peterman is here to prove that he can stick on the roster. It's looking more and more like a practice squad situation for the 5th-round pick. But I think it's simply because, like what you said, Tyrod's the number 1. TJ Yates has won playoff games. You can't struggle if you're Nathan Peterman. You have to have consistently good days to try to bid for that number 2 spot.
The observation I saw tweeted out the most from Bills media about Peterman's performance yesterday was the arm strength wasn't there.
Ooh.
But that's not really something that he brought in. I mean, at Pitt, his big thing, and big thing not only in the ACC rankings and in the rankings across the country and the sport, was that he was a game manager extraordinaire, which isn't necessarily – it usually is with NFL quarterbacks. That is a slight, but not with him. Very efficient, but it's not going to guy – he's not a guy that's going to wow you in terms of arm strength or wow you getting out of the pocket. He just is very solid. He's very efficient. And that's what you're really getting with him. So I'm not super surprised they didn't show a bunch of arm strength. But that gives him a leg up on Cardale Jones, because a lot of people said Cardale Jones, all the talent in the world, but the guy did not necessarily have football IQ at this point in his career.
Almost the complete opposite.
He couldn't even get in and out of the pocket. Not the pocket. Get out of the pocket. Couldn't even get in and out of the huddle sometimes. And don't even talk about the playbook with him. So this is a guy that doesn't have that natural talent, but is much better in terms of at least a football mind, much more efficient. He's at least going to get the job done. Potential is not what you're going to see in a Cardale Jones. But, hey, if he gets thrown in, he'll be able to have a serviceable game, I think. So I'm really looking forward to see what he does in the preseason.
You know what's amazing to me? All right, so arm strength was the biggest thing. It was Peterman's biggest struggle. Mm-hmm. I'm amazed that there are a lot of people coming out of the draft, and I get this. This is hype talk while you're in the draft show. But there are a lot of people that said he may be the most NFL-ready quarterback in the class. That's surprising out of a 5th-round pick, and then it's surprising to hear that he struggles on day 1. Now, if it's only the arm strength that's the problem, okay, you kind of get what you get with him, and maybe you hope to get him in the weight room. I'm not really sure what you do at that point. I'm obviously not a football coach. So
I don't know what the maturation is in football players, if they can really add arm strength at this point in their career. I don't know.
We'll see. You hope that he gets better, and you hope that he shows some signs, but honestly, if it's a 5th-round pick, it is what it is, It's you give him an opportunity to try to find lightning in a bottle there, and if it doesn't pan out, it doesn't pan out. I mean, listen, Tyrod was a 5th-round pick, and he's a starting quarterback now. But it took him 4 years of sitting behind Joe Flacco to learn the game, and then 2, to get an opportunity.
Today, what I'm going to look at with Nathan Peterman is his accuracy, because I'd be very surprised if that's what is going to be a problem for him, because that seemed to be part of his efficiency and why he was so good on a national basis, and especially in the ACC last season for Pitt when it came to QBR.
Yeah.
I'd be very surprised if his accuracy was an issue. We'll see. It's NFL.
Yeah. Let's go to Odell Beckham Jr. Your boy wants to get paid. And not just paid for a wide receiver. He wants to be the highest paid player in the league. Is Odell Beckham worthy of the most dollars in the NFL?
I mean, he obviously has plenty of on-the-field accolades. I'm not trying to say anything against that. But is he a bigger name or a bigger player is the question. Obviously not physically in terms not somebody who could play in the line.
Good
Because
question.
this is a guy, his persona, whether it be his hair or the way he dresses, or whether it's off the field antics, whether it's videos of him dancing at a very nice club, at a nightclub, or him kicking a net for kicking. It's one of those things. So is he known more for that? Probably not. He's probably not known more for the antics than his game, but it's enough of the mix. There's enough of people that know him for that kind of ridiculousness that I don't know if he's known enough for his game to be getting that kind of contract.
Let me play devil's advocate here. Doesn't that increase his value, though? Because you know his name and you know he's associated with the Giants? Listen, he's an asset, okay? And that's the way you got to look at it if you're the Giants. How valuable is that asset to you? Now, the Maras appear to only be concerned with football, kind of like the Rooneys in Pittsburgh, where it's what's your production, don't get in trouble off the field. It's pretty cut and dry, black and white, if you will. But this is a guy that raises awareness. I mean, he was on the cover of Madden, his second year in the league? Mm-hmm. Not many guys do that. It's hard to be that one guy that's on the league. There are how many players in the NFL? He's the one guy. And it wasn't just the spectacular three-fingered catch that got him there. That's what, started it. That's what sparked this. But it is the off-the-field antics. It is his awareness of who he is and that persona. It's more than it's the ODB persona, I think, that is what he's kind of referring to, along with his football ability. Now, he may say publicly that it's, my football ability should get me there. And that's one thing to debate. The real question is a wide receiver worthy of being the highest paid player? Is that the most valued position on the field? The obvious answer is no. The obvious answer is it's a quarterback, and it's a quarterback-driven league. If it was a wide receiver-driven league, okay, he deserves to be the highest paid player. Defensive line, guys that can get to the quarterback are valued extremely high. Marcel Darius is one of the highest paid defensive tackles in the game, if not the highest paid defensive tackle in the game. J.J. Watt, one of the highest paid defensive ends. Von Miller, guys that get to the quarterback, because why? The quarterback's the most important position in the league. He's not worthy of being the highest paid player in the league. He's just not.
And another way to think about it is, and we were talking about this, I was making this point right before we went on today, is that just looking at the offense, I would think a quarterback deserves to get a little bit more in terms of contract money than a wideout, because at the very least, there are two as opposed to just one starters at that position on an offense. So when you think about it like that in terms of importance of individual positions, you have that into it. But the guy is going to sell jerseys. He's going to sell tickets. That is what the persona does from a positive standpoint. But like you mentioned, this is a old school football family in the Maras. I don't think not only wanting a bigger contract just behind closed doors with a guy with his kind of persona and antics is a great move, at least to push it so much, especially not to push it this publicly. I don't think they're going to like that at all, the Maras.
Well, what's interesting, too, is you think about the Bills before Rex Ryan. They were an afterthought in the national media. They were. Yeah. Rex Ryan gets here. Well, Rex is going to Buffalo, from Broadway to Buffalo.
And he deserves to be talked about.
He brings these players with him. He's a player's coach. He brings them national attention. That's maybe the argument that Odell Beckham can... Not that a New York City-based team is not going to get attention. They are. It's the biggest market in the country. But if you're not good, the Jets will not get national attention this year. Why? They're not good. They don't have the players. They're still in the biggest market in the country, but they're not going to get the attention the Giants are going to get. And there were a couple years when Rex was at his peak with Mark Sanchez and whatnot and making the AFC Championship game, where you could argue that the Jets were a bigger deal than the Giants, maybe, from an attention standpoint. Odell brings you that attention. But at the end of the day, no matter how much attention a wide receiver brings, it's still not a more important position than the quarterback. It's just not. And that's where we end up in this debate, is that it's just not a bigger deal. All right, let's move to UFC 214, Cormier Jones, round 2. What do you got?
Well, just like you said, those two last names. I mean, this is arguably the biggest rivalry in UFC history. Maybe up there in the top 25. We're going to split 50 in half for rivalries of all time. So if you go and watch the videos, I mean, these guys, from them saying they're going to kill each other when they didn't know that they had hot mics on a SportsCenter interview, from them having a press event where they're doing the stare down and they get a huge brawl and they go careening off the stage, smashing a big, I guess, backdrop you could call it, and a bunch of people. It was like a scene from 300. It was absolutely absurd. They have, you can go and easily find examples of what a huge rivalry this is. And the fact that they were supposed to fight around a year ago. They were supposed to fight, I think it was UFC 108 or something like that. And right before John Bones Jones gets busted by the anti-doping agency. I remember seeing the video of the second Dana White told Daniel Cormier, who was obviously really, really hoping for some revenge on John Bones Jones, and he was just started stamping his foot. And I believe him. I mean, that's a huge rivalry. And yes, he had to be very bitter that he didn't win the first time. And he wanted so bad that chance to get another chance at him.
Who wanted that?
Cormier, because he lost the first time.
Okay, all right.
And he did not have that chance go against him again around a year ago because of him being suspended. But now John Bones Jones is back. They're pretty tamer than I wanted them to be, almost, to a certain degree, as a UFC fan.
They were probably told to be.
Yes, Dana White was going to be on top of it. He doesn't want to be thrown off a stage again.
He doesn't want to get punched.
Yeah.
When I think Cormier Jones, I immediately think to the behind-the-scenes hot mic situation where they just got into it. And Cormier's Cormier. To me, on camera or off, he acts, you're getting the actual Daniel Cormier. He doesn't change at all. I said Danielle, that was bad. Daniel Cormier.
Tell Daniel you're in
trouble. John Jones has a persona, an on-air persona and an off-air persona, and you clearly saw that. So, and that YouTube video got a ton of views. So there's a lot of people that know about this, and there's a lot of people that see John Jones and go, man, that dude's fake. And the one thing we want in any battle combat sport, hand-to-hand combat sport, is you want guys to be genuine. I don't know why that is, but we want genuine boxers or fighters, whatever. Fighters is the better term, whether it be boxing or MMA. You want someone that's genuine. Yeah, hand-to-hand combat. I don't know why it is we want guys to be genuine, because football players, they say one thing and do another, and we don't really care. But this is the one sport where that's not the case. We demand honesty from fighters, and I can't quite put a finger on it. I'm not wise enough to do that. It's just an observation. This is a big fight for John Jones. This is a massive fight for John Jones. It's been a while since he's been in the octagon, and it's been a while since there hasn't been controversy leading up to a fight for him. I almost forgot that this fight was this weekend if you didn't mention it, because there hasn't been the controversy around it. There wasn't the fight at the press conference. There wasn't a failed drug test. It was almost normal. The lead-up was quote-unquote normal for a UFC event. That's amazing to me. I feel like John Jones almost exists better when there's some sort of controversy. Maybe it'll happen on fight night. I don't know. I am looking forward to this fight simply because of the out of the octagon, the off the field stuff, so to speak, has been, I'm trying to think of the most appropriate word here. It's been tumultuous for John Jones. I think that's maybe the best way to describe it. And for Cormier, he's just kind of got about his business and fought.
So going back to your point about why we want them to be the realest, maybe, these kind of combat sport athletes in the professional sports world, is maybe because we see them, in terms of them actually playing their sport, we see them more so than any other sport in terms of, I mean, besides some trunks or
it's
if it's
so raw.
women. it's a sports bra, or we can see some kind of gloves on their hands. We're seeing them. There's no jerseys or helmets blocking them. We're seeing them. So maybe in terms of off the field as well, them in press conferences, we want to see them, the equivalent of that as well, inside and outside of the ring or outside of the octagon. So that's my take on that.
It's an interesting observation because, and this is obviously a debate we can get into at another time, but they're solo. They're in there like a tennis player or a golfer, but I don't even think we demand the type of honesty from a golfer that we do, a boxer, an MMA athlete. We want, and that's the thing. I think it's just such a raw, brutal sport that we want the raw, honest to God truth. We do demand it, I think, a little bit from golfers, but it's not as much because they're complete opposites. One is a sport of prestige and one is a blood sport. And for some odd reason, in the prestige sport, we'll let you BS us. But in the blood sport, don't you lie to us. Don't be fake with us. And that, I don't know, it's just amazing to me. So just a thought on the fly, if you will, is the way not the actual fly, but the expression on the fly, on the go. I don't know. We a little off topic, but I think it's fascinating. And it's no more present to me than with John Jones and with this fight, because you have someone in Cormier who is who he is, and you have John Jones, and you have the fighter, and you have whoever he is behind closed doors.
So, going back to another one of your points before the recording got screwed up there, is the surprising nature that the stuff this week, the press events, the weigh-ins, weren't crazier between these two because, geez, over the last year, while he's been suspended, John Bones Jones, there has been so many events, so many of these UFC fight nights where they've had a war of words like within the actual action itself.
Yeah.
So after Cormier wins, you have John Bones Jones there in Buffalo, and you have them not only staring down but yelling stuff at each other. Obviously, you could hear what Cormier was saying more because he has a mic with him with Joe Rogan in the octagon itself.
Yeah.
But he was there ringside, and they're going at it in terms of yelling stuff at each other. And then when John Bones Jones made his return to UFC action, but not in terms of actually fighting for a belt, you had him doing something similar. Actually, the color guy on the call was Daniel Cormier, so he was even close to the ringside. He was just right there calling the action there with, I don't know who it was, Greenberg or Rogan or whoever. So the build-up in terms of the last year was huge, but the last week, very surprising there wasn't more to it.
All right, this week, the 22nd episode of To Be Determined, to be recorded on Sunday. We're going to be joined by FOTS, Prescott Rossi, who was kind enough to join us during rehearsals, and we aired his rehearsal. We've tried a couple times to get him on, and we've had some scheduling conflicts. Finally able to get Prescott Rossi, one of the original FOTS of the show. Anyone that appeared in rehearsals is an original FOTS in my mind. We're going to talk Bills camp. He's a guy that covers the beat. That is
Down in drought.
Just aired 17 episodes of a podcast himself in Down and Drought. Really good stuff.
On the Bills.
On the Bills, playoff drought, obviously. So we'll talk Bills camp with him. We'll what are the differences between Rex and McDermott just in terms of the camp? I think you get a pretty good idea. Matt, you're going to have a good idea after going today about the differences between McDermott and Sexy Rex.
There's going to be a lot.
Yeah. So it's I'm eager to hear because I've not had a chance to get out there yet. So I'm eager to hear the differences, just the feel. If anything, it's a different regime there, so it'll be different. So we'll see everybody on Monday. Matt, I will see you on Sunday.